The Supreme Court is wrong on the Second Amendment.
The following is intended to be an in-depth view of the Clintons' legacy and values, starting with Bill Clinton.
I'll tell you a couple of stories about fraud.
But I want to say one thing to the American people. I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie, not a single time, never. These allegations are false.
Indeed, I did have a relationship with Miss Lewinsky that was not appropriate. In fact, it was wrong. It constituted a critical lapse in judgment and a personal failure on my part for which I am solely and completely responsible.
Bill Clinton was no stranger to scandal, investigation, and controversy. But the question arises, did he use undue influence and his position of power to assist his wife, Hillary Clinton, in her investigation of the emails? Was the investigation of emails even a legitimate investigation? Let's take an in-depth look.
We can't prosecute anyone. Only the Department of Justice can, and they've made it, frankly, crystal clear they're not prosecuting anyone in this fact pattern. So where's the criminal liability?
Although there was a lot of press and controversy surrounding Hillary Clinton's email scandal, to call it an investigation would be a complete falsehood. There was no evidence gathered, and any questions that were asked were simply not answered. The entire investigation was a sham and was simply a process wherewith she was liberated from any scandal or culpability.
So did the agents then did not consider to conduct the interview in a recorded situation then?
We do not record non-custodial interviews.
Were you interviewed by the FBI? On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer and assert my Fifth Amendment constitutional privilege. You can't answer the question about whether or not you were interviewed by the FBI? Given that the witness has indicated he does not intend to answer any questions out of respect for his constitutional rights, we will now excuse Mr. Thornton from the table. Mr. Gambetta, you're an IT guy who's paid by the Clintons. Generally, IT guys don't erase their clients' emails unless they're told to do so. So who told you to delete the emails?
On advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer and assert my Fifth Amendment privilege.
Given that you have indicated that you do not intend to answer any questions out of respect for your constitutional rights, we will now excuse you from the table. Okay?
Who told you that 90 to 95% of your emails were in the State Department system? Who told you that?
We learned that from the State Department in their analysis of the emails that were already on the system.
The Inspector General report found that less than 1% of State Department emails, record emails, were captured. So they give a number of less than 1%, and you give a number of 90%.
I have absolute confidence that everything that could be in any way connected to work is now in the possession of the State Department.
NAFTA, or the North American Free Trade Agreement, was sponsored by Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and proved devastating upon the United States manufacturing economy, allowing our once thriving industry to become a wasteland that was undercut by foreign countries who did not share our values or humanitarian rights for workers. Essentially, this sweatshop style of manufacturing on a global scale undercut the American economy.
It was one of the highlights of President Clinton's first term, passage of the North American Free Trade Agreement, also known as NAFTA. Critics blame NAFTA for the loss of manufacturing jobs in industrial states including Ohio and Pennsylvania. Hillary Clinton helped get NAFTA approved. She held at least 5 meetings to strategize about how to win congressional approval. She helped the White House block opposition from labor and environmental groups, and she was the featured speaker at a crucial meeting. Participants in that event said, quote, her remarks were totally pro-NAFTA. There was no equivocation for her support for NAFTA at the time.
You know, I have been a critic of NAFTA from the very beginning. My concerns about NAFTA expressed years ago have been well documented and verified. I didn't have a public position on it. I have spoken consistently against NAFTA. And if you look at what I have been saying, it has been consistent. I have been consistent. You can go back and look at from the very beginning. I was one of the voices in the administration warning about NAFTA.
You said it was good on balance for New York and America in 2004, and now you're in Ohio, and your words are much different, Senator. The record is very clear.
Well, you don't have all the record, because you can go back and look at what I've said consistently. Oh, I think that everybody is in favor of free and fair trade, and I think that NAFTA is proving its worth.
I think on balance, NAFTA has been good for New York and America.
Once a month, Hillary would go out to Los Angeles. And she did it so regular that it became a bit of an issue trying to, why is she always going? Bill told me that she was going out there, she and a group of women, and she would be a part of a witches' church. And, man, when Bill told me that, you could have hit me with a baseball bat. I tried to point out to him, you realize what had happened if that got out? Of course, my job is to make sure it didn't get out. Now, I don't know today if Hillary still partakes in the witch ritual. I don't know that I even know what the ritual was. But for the better part of many years, Hillary would go quite often, whether it was regularly once a month or maybe once every couple of months. She would go out on a weekend simply to be a part of it.
She's worked like a demon, as you know, as Secretary of State and as a senator, and in the years since.
Now, one of the things that I have learned about Hillary Clinton is that one of her heroes, her mentors, was Saul Alinsky. And her senior thesis was about Saul Alinsky. This was someone that she greatly admired and that affected all of her philosophies subsequently. Now, interestingly enough, let me tell you something about Saul Alinsky. He wrote a book called Rules for Radicals. On the dedication page, it acknowledges Lucifer, the original radical who gained his own kingdom.
Hillary Clinton has proven to be a master at running from her past. In fact, going so far as to change her views and attitudes and rig the election primaries themselves. She appears to have no particular position other than the one that serves her best at the time.
Will you say anything to get elected?
Well, actually, I have been very consistent over the course of my entire life. I have always fought for the same values and principles. I have not supported same-sex marriage. I have supported civil partnerships and contractual relationships.
I support marriage for lesbian and gay couples. I support it personally and as a matter of policy and law.
There are people who are on the streets and involved in this movement who were there in '96 when the Welfare Reform Act was passed. They were there in 1994 when the Violent Crime Act was passed. They have a sense of how Clinton had a part in proliferating and spreading a lot of the problems that we're talking about now.
It's a very well thought out crime bill that is both smart and tough. And we will eventually get a good crime bill like the president has proposed. It'll just take a little longer than it should have.
Hold me accountable. Hold every candidate accountable. What we say matters, but what we do matters more. We have to demonstrate a sustained commitment to building opportunity, creating prosperity, and righting wrongs.
Her electability argument boils down, in effect, to working class white Americans are not ready to vote for a black American president.
Yeah, it was fairly shocking. I suppose at this rate, by the time we get to Kentucky, it'll be segregation now, segregation forever.
They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel.
It was never used to describe anyone white. It was always used to describe young black men as a mass, and it made life very tough for us.
I think it's absurd to suggest she's a friend of children who are in need or families. This is a woman who, when her husband was governor, I first met her at that time, they were bragging about their welfare reform, which destroyed what existed of support for poor children in Arkansas. Then as president, her husband, with her full-throated approval, destroyed the aid to families with dependent children, which 70% of the people on that program were children.
Common sense gun reform, criminal justice reform, and all the like. So I think we've got a very, we've got somebody saying here, we have to bring them
apologize for mass incarceration.
Okay, we'll talk about it.
I'm not a super predator. Hillary Clinton.
Okay, fine. Now, you want to hear the facts, you just want to talk. You know what? Nobody's ever asked me before. You're the first person to ask me, and I'm happy to address it, but you are the first person to ask me here. Okay, back to the issues.
You know, I know who Margaret Sanger is, and I know that she believed in eugenics and that she was not particularly enamored with black people. And one of the reasons that you find most of their clinics in black neighborhoods is so that you can find a way to control that population. And I think people should go back and read about Margaret Sanger, who founded this place, a woman who Hillary Clinton, by the way, says that she admires. Look and see what many people in Nazi Germany thought about her.
Well, I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically, delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things, just marked when they're born. That, to me, is the greatest sin.
I admire Margaret Sanger enormously. Her courage, her tenacity, her vision. I am really in awe of her. And there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from her life and from the cause she launched and fought for and sacrificed so greatly.
Sanger's admiration for the eugenics programs of Nazi Germany were well known at the time. In 1933, the Birth Control Review published Eugenic Sterilization, an Urgent Need, by Ernst Rudin, who was Hitler's director of genetic sterilization and the founder of the Nazi Society for Racial Hygiene. In her praise for the eugenics programs in Germany, Sanger called for the implementation of such programs in the United States, specifically targeting African Americans.
Among hardworking Americans, white Americans.
Today, our country has lost a true American original, my friend and mentor, Robert C. Byrd. Senator Byrd was a man of surpassing eloquence and nobility, and I will remember him for many things. It is almost impossible to imagine the United States Senate without Robert Byrd. He was not just its longest serving member, he was its heart, its soul, and its historian. From my first day in the Senate, I sought out his guidance, and he was always generous with his time and his wisdom. I admired his tireless advocacy for his West Virginia constituents, his fierce defense of the Constitution and the traditions of the Senate, and his passion for a government that improves the lives of the people it serves. As Secretary of State, I continued to rely on his advice and counsel. Robert C. Byrd led by the power of his example, and he made all of us who had the honor of serving as his colleagues better public servants and better citizens. Robert C. Byrd left such a legacy.
Now, is Libya perfect? It isn't. But did they have 2 elections that were free and fair where they voted for moderates? Yes, they did. So, you know, changing from a dictator who has hollowed out your country to something resembling a functioning state, and even hopefully more of a democratic one, doesn't happen overnight. And we've got to continue to support the Libyan people, to give them a chance, because otherwise you see what's happened in Syria with the consequences of millions of people flooding out of Syria, with more than 250,000 people killed, with terrorist groups like ISIS taking up almost a huge swath of territory, as big as some of the states in that area. So, yes, I mean, Libya was a different kind of calculation.
Many people have heard of Benghazi in relation to Hillary Clinton, but what most people do not realize is the inside story behind the country and what actually happened.
The UK's gold is kept here in a secure vault somewhere in the depths of the Bank of England. As in most developed countries, there's not enough to go around. But that's not the case in places like Libya and many of the Gulf states. A gold dinar would have given oil-rich African and Middle Eastern countries the power to turn around to their energy-hungry customers and say, sorry, the price has gone up and we want gold. Some say the US and its NATO allies literally couldn't afford to let that happen.
So, I mean, that is the land of unconfirmed.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
No, oh, I'm sure it did.
The level of devastation and destabilization that Hillary Clinton's influence as Secretary of State while involved with Benghazi and Libya produced is undeniable. The proliferation of Islamic fundamentalist groups such as ISIS has spread and is only beginning to show its full potential and aggravation to the world stability and peace. A once fruitful country that was fully functioning has now become a devastated, destabilized wasteland.
This pile represents the emails that you sent or received about Libya in 2011, from February through December of 2011. This pile represents the emails you sent or received from early 2012 until the day of the attack. There are 795 emails in this pile. We've counted them. There are 67 emails in this pile in 2012. And I'm troubled by what I see here. I can only conclude by your own records that there was a lack of interest in Libya in 2012.
Hillary Clinton has made it abundantly clear that anyone that is against her as a dissident or whistleblower can and will be dealt with in whatever fashion she sees fit. The question arises if this is the type of regime or empire that we want America to become. Do we wish to place someone in power that can and will do anything that they want to retain that power and proliferate the agenda of the elite? Do we wish for America to become an empire or to remain a democratic republic that is ruled by the people for the people?